All right, folks, this is pretty much take three of a video that I've wanted to do. I do want to talk about a couple theological concepts that I learned. I learn a lot from listening to Bishop Robert Barron's podcast every single day as I drive. And he has a Word on Fire podcast. Um, by the way, as I'm drawing, I'm going to be thinking out loud about the drawing while I'm talking about this topic here. And I'm a bit disappointed that I was satisfied with the folds in the pants there, but we're going to cover it up right now um, using this little tassel, or not a tassel, I'm not sure, this cloth here that as it lays down. Um, but that's okay. Just cover it up because I want this to, I want to be faithful to the design. And that is a pretty cool design element. Now, it does go all the way down, actually. So I'm going to go all the way down here. Just let it hang down. It pretty much comes straight down. Actually, I'm going to think about gravity here. Well, yeah, we got a little fold down there too as it goes up. Okay, so I'm just going to erase. I don't often like, destroying work, but I think the underneath looked pretty good, and everything is in the right spot, so we'll just do it this way. Okay, so now pull up here. Now again, this is take three of an sort of a thought spill video that I wanted to do. Um, so there's two concepts I've been thinking about from Bishop Robert Barron that I've kind of learned from him. He's a great philosopher, great theologian, great teacher. Um, and the first one is called the Privatio Boni. That means the privation of good. And that is what evil is, that the Catholic Church teaches that's what evil is. So, I mean, most people in modernity, and it seems more intuitive to think this way, that evil is an opposite, opposing, equal force to good. Think of yin and yang. Think of, that darkness and light are opposite. But even in the naturalistic sense, you can see that darkness is actually just the absence of light. Like, what is empty space? Well, there's just no photons there. I mean, we can talk more about like quantum foam, that no space is really empty, or whatever. But thinking of it more simply, like empty space, there's just nothing there. And so, I guess theologically, the Catholic Church believes that it's the same thing with good and evil. That yeah, it's just the absence of good, the privatio boni. So I think of an example, specifically like in Star Wars is one I think of, like in the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope. General Tarkin blows up Alderaan using the Death Star. He blows up all of Princess Leia's family, and her planet, and all the nature and beauty and animals, and trees and everything that's there. It just gets blown up in an instant. And across the universe, Obi-Wan is like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like a bunch of people just disappeared all at once." Um, and it's like, um, yeah, and it's clearly visible that Tarkin is doing an act of evil, but if we observe the act of evil itself, it's basically reducing something that was organized and good and beautiful into emptiness and nothingness. And so if we apply that to like a lot of things that we consider evil, like for example, the Catholic Church believes that pride is a vice. So if I continue with the idea of the privatio boni, like what is missing if pride is evil? It's humility before God. So what is pride? Pride is actually less than humility, not more than humility. So pride would be defined as like, I believe that like my plans are good, my plans are right, that this life is about me and my ideas. Where and I guess if one didn't believe in God, that would be like the right thing to do. Where you're like, I create my own meaning, because the world by itself is meaningless. Um, but if one does believe in God, and believes that there is, intelligent design is not the right word, but there is, something, um, that there is an omniscient, omnipresent, um, power, the source of all things, that knows and is wiser, and is better than us. And if we submit to his will, then we will have life in its fullness. That it's like, then that idea of freedom and pride kind of falls apart, because why not submit oneself to the infinite spirit of love and wisdom, as opposed to utilizing our own finite wisdom, which can never, which will only be like a portion, a small portion of what is really there. Um, so it's kind of like that, and you can really apply that to any pair of virtue and vice, like lust and chastity, diligence and sloth. For that one, it's pretty easy to see, but something like lust and chastity, like lust is like there's activity going on there with lust. But what is chastity? Is chastity saying no to the activity? So does that really mean um, uh, there's something more good about chastity if you're saying no? Well, what it means is that, I mean, lust is destructive. Chastity is creative in the sense that it's saying no to bad things in order to do things that are more life-giving, more loving. Um, whereas lust is kind of this me, very similar to pride. So the privatio boni. So I've been thinking about that and what it means for me to be a better person and what it means for me to combat my vice. That there's for any evil that I've done, which I mean I have done a lot, and I hope that most of you can admit that you have done some too. You know, we've all done some evil in some way, um, and for me to increase in virtue means to address those that emptiness that has been created, that void that's been created by the evils that we've done, and fill it with something good. So the other thing that I think about, the second concept, is called the virtue of magnanimity. Um, when you look up magnanimity in like the dictionary or thesaurus, it often talks about generosity. Um, but the root word of it is magna animus, or I forgot what's anima, which means soul. So magna is great. So magnanimity means greatness of soul, and to pursue the virtue of magnanimity means pursuing greatness of virtue, pursuing greatness of soul. So it doesn't necessarily mean pursuing greatness of wealth or pursuing greatness of honor. Even though the things that you do that are magnanimous are worthy of honor and praise, that if one is lives an honorable life, that that honor is not meant for oneself, but rather the honor is meant to be like, if something is honorable, that means it's a good example for other people to emulate, which is more for other people than for oneself, because a magnanimous person is not seeking one's own honor, but rather the honor of God and the abundance of life for other people. Um, so I've been thinking about that a lot, and that for me, I've been I mean, I admit I've been a really bad person in life, and what I'm trying to do by pursuing magnanimity is not necessarily to redeem myself. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking to like change my life so that others will laud me and others will be like, "Oh, you've changed." That's not it. Rather, I've lived so selfishly for a lot of my life, and now what would be magnanimous would be to live selflessly, so that if I do things that are honorable, it's not for my own sake, but for the sake of others, that others may have life. And that's the whole point. That's what I deprived people of by being not the best person I could be. People were deprived. The people who needed me in my recent past and distant past were deprived of the good that could have been there. So what does evil mean for me in my evil actions in the past? It means I was not good enough. I was not submitting myself to the greater wisdom that was accessible, that was available to me, but instead depriving people by doing acts that benefited myself. And what's interesting is, like, if you take a look at like things like marketing, like, why would anyone need a Coca-Cola ever besides it tasting good? And that's fine. It's fine for it to taste good. It, like, enjoying the goods of the world, that's fine. But for me, it's like I know it's terrible for my health, and I enjoy water more, and I think there are drinks that are more nutritious for me. Like, it's fine if, like, on a Sunday or whatever, or at a party, I have a Coke or a beer or something. Um, but I know that there is better for me and better for others. That if I drink a water, or maybe I don't know, some juice, or I don't know, something that might benefit my health a little bit more, that there will be more abundance in my own life. And if there's more abundance in my own life, then there's more abundance in the life of others. So applying the Privatio Boni and applying the idea of magnanimity to my actions, um, really it resonates with my soul lately because I want to do well for others now. But it requires a lot of sacrifice, and the idea of humility, like if magnanimity applies to all virtues and also humility applies to all virtues, then that means I mean, virtue in general, the virtue of fortitude, like a lot of like growing in all these virtues requires sacrifice, requires sacrificing like the habits that I have, the pain that I feel, in order to do good. Because I learned that in spiritual discernment, which I talk about in another video, um, the things that are good are not things that necessarily make you feel better, but you're growing in soul. Your spirit is growing when you grow in love and virtue, not when you feel good. Obviously, it does feel good sometimes to have those graces and to recognize I am growing in virtue, but the result of it is not always going to end up in good feelings, and often it can end up in a lot of suffering. And in fact, it might more often end up in suffering than good feelings because, I mean, I look at Jesus Christ as an example. He died for our sins. Um, and I mean, like I can think about him on the cross, but I can think about it even more just conceptually. Like, if Jesus was perfectly good and everyone else was not perfectly good, I mean, who takes the punishment? If there's two people living in a house and one of them is perfectly good, keeping everything clean, and the other person is not keeping everything clean, who's gonna have and is less responsible about cleaning up? Who's gonna take the punishment? I mean, and let's say the person is unrepentant, that they don't really care about keeping everything clean, but the two people are living there, and they're going to keep living there. Well, the person who's clean has a set of choices. Like I can say, oh, I'm going to kick you out now, which I mean God does have that kind of justice ready for us. Or if you're going to be repentant, then I'll decide I'll forgive you. You can still live with me. Um, but either way, the person who takes the punishment first, I mean, both of them take the punishment. The person who's not clean is going to be living in a filthy home, and the person who is clean is going to be living in a filthy home. So really, um, but the one who is more perfect is going to take the punishment undeservedly. The person who is less perfect is going to be taking the punishment just because that's the result of their actions. But the result of their actions affects other people. So with that in mind, um, with Jesus as an example, it's up to me to live virtuously so that the people living in the same room as me, the people living on the same planet as me, are not living in a filthy place. And that is magnanimous. That is greatness of soul. I'm not seeking my own glory. I don't want to. I mean, there's a part of me that will want it. Like we all have that concupiscence. We all have that temptation to be like, I want to do something so people can so people can honor me, so that I can feel better about myself. Well, that's fine. Like honor is not a bad thing, and feeling good about oneself is not a bad thing. But that's not God, and we can't make honor into God. Um, so these are the things that have been on my mind lately. So yeah, I think I'll stop the video there because I kind of talked about the concepts I wanted to talk about. And we are just coloring Kuyomi again, and we will continue coloring him, coloring these guys. We're gonna get painting. So talk to you guys later. God bless. Bye bye.